The story of Judy Buenoano begins like many small-town American stories do, quietly, almost tenderly, beneath the dust of hard years and the silence of broken dreams. She was born Judy Welty in 1943 in Quanah, Texas, a girl who learned too early that love could vanish overnight. Her mother died when she was 4. Her father remarried quickly, and Judy's childhood became a blur of new houses, new rules, and cold eyes that looked through her more than at her. By the time she was 10, she'd stopped expecting kindness. She learned to survive by watching others, their weaknesses, their tempers, their needs. Behind her still blue eyes, a quiet resentment grew. At 15, she was sent to a girls' reform school for petty theft and violence. Counselors described her as bright, manipulative, and angry. But even they couldn't see what was forming inside her, a deep conviction that no one would ever control her again. Years later, after her release, she met a young Air Force sergeant named James Goodyear. He was steady, polite, and proud to wear his uniform. Judy, now a mother of a small son, seemed to find safety in him, or perhaps opportunity. To neighbors, she was devoted, soft-spoken. To James, she was affectionate, even charming. Their wedding photo would later become a haunting artifact. Judy's smile frozen, just wide enough to hide everything she was never going to say. For a while, they looked like any other military family. 3 children, quiet evenings in Florida, the sound of base aircraft in the distance. But inside their modest home, the fractures widened. Judy wanted more comfort, more respect, more control. James wanted order, loyalty, and peace. Then came his deployment to Vietnam. When he returned, he was weaker, thinner, and exhausted from malaria and stress. Judy nursed him dutifully, spooning soup, folding blankets, smiling as she handed him the small pills she said would help him sleep. Within weeks, James began vomiting violently. His skin yellowed, his muscles ached, his hands trembled. Doctors couldn't explain it. "It's probably an infection," one said. Judy stood by the bed, her hand resting on his chest, her face unreadable. 3 months later, he was gone. She wore black at the funeral, wept softly, and accepted condolences with graceful silence. To friends and neighbors, she was the picture of tragedy. To the insurance company, she was the new beneficiary of a $20,000 policy. In the quiet after his death, Judy sat in the darkened living room, the folded flag from his service resting on her lap. She whispered to herself, "I'm free." If this story moves you, the kind that hides pain behind polite smiles, secrets behind suburban doors, make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Stories like these remind us how darkness often wears a familiar face. Years passed. Judy moved forward, moving her children to Colorado, then back to Florida. She started a beauty parlor, wore her hair high, her lipstick perfect. Clients described her as practical, business-minded. But beneath that calm exterior, there was always a hum of calculation. In 1978, she began dating Bobby Joe Morris, a heavy-set, good-natured man who made her laugh and paid the bills. For a while, things were light. Then Bobby began complaining of stomach pains. He grew weaker by the day. Judy cooked for him, fed him vitamin supplements, and sat beside him with gentle concern. When he died that January, she wrote letters to his family, expressing her sorrow. The cause was listed as a heart attack. Within months, Judy collected another life insurance policy. But something shifted in her that year. She began calling herself Judy Buenoano, a name she said meant good year in Spanish. She told friends it was for a fresh start. To investigators later, it would symbolize something else, a new identity, a reinvention after each death. Still, life went on. Judy raised her teenage son, Michael, and daughter, Kimberly, in a small house on a quiet street. She was stern but attentive, strict about homework, careful with money, demanding respect. Then Michael began to feel unwell. At first it was fatigue, then weakness in his legs. Doctors were puzzled. The paralysis spread until braces locked his legs in place. Judy told neighbors it was a mystery illness. To his teacher, she said, "He'll walk again one day." But Michael's illness had a shadow no one yet saw. Traces of arsenic silently collecting in his blood. In May of 1980, Judy suggested they go canoeing on a calm Florida river, just mother and son. Witnesses later recalled the day as bright and windless. Midway across the water, the canoe tipped. Michael, weighed down by his heavy leg braces, sunk fast. Judy swam to shore, screaming for help, but by the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. It was an accident, she told police, trembling convincingly. They believed her. The autopsy found nothing unusual. Within weeks, she received another insurance payout, $55,000 for the death of her son. But the town whispered. Some said her grief seemed rehearsed. Others said she was cursed. She told her daughter Kimberly, "We must keep going. We must be strong." Years later, Kimberly would tell reporters, "I wanted to believe her. I really did." In 1982, Judy began dating John Gentry, a successful businessman from Pensacola. John was athletic, kind, and generous. He fell hard for Judy's quiet charm. Friends described them as inseparable. She told him she was a doctor, even claimed to have a degree in biochemistry. He believed her. Not long after they met, Judy started giving him vitamins. She said, "They'll keep you healthy," with a smile. But after a few months, John grew increasingly ill. Nausea, weakness, confusion. When he mentioned his symptoms, she'd frown sympathetically. "You're just overworked, John." Then one evening in 1983, Judy convinced him to take her out to celebrate their supposed engagement. As John started his car, it exploded, a thunderous blast that tore through the parking lot. Miraculously, he survived, badly injured but alive. Police arrived within minutes. As investigators combed the scene, they found wiring, detonators, a homemade bomb. John, recovering in the hospital, told detectives about Judy's vitamin pills, about her sudden wealth, her insurance suggestions. His words reopened every buried grave in Judy's past. Authorities exhumed the bodies of James Goodyear and Bobby Joe Morris. Tests revealed arsenic poisoning in both. When Michael's remains were examined, the same traces appeared. The quiet woman from the beauty salon was suddenly the center of a multi-state homicide investigation. Detective Bob Black recalled, "She was calm, almost proud. She never flinched." Judy denied everything. She said, "They're framing me. I'm a victim of bad luck." But her calm was cracking. As evidence mounted, receipts for arsenic, forged insurance documents, fabricated degrees, the image she had built for decades began to collapse. Neighbors were stunned. One said, "She was so polite, always neat, always smiling." Another whispered, "That woman was the devil herself." During the 1984 trial for the murder of her husband, the courtroom was packed. Reporters described Judy's demeanor as cold but poised. The prosecution presented chemical reports, handwriting analyses, and witness statements linking her to multiple deaths. When the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, Judy didn't cry. She simply adjusted her hair and looked straight ahead. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. "You will be sentenced to death in the electric chair." Outside, a crowd cheered. Inside, her daughter Kimberly sobbed silently. Over the years that followed, Judy continued to maintain her innocence. She gave interviews telling reporters she was a strong woman, not a killer. But behind prison walls, time began to peel away her defenses. Letters to friends hinted at regret. She wrote once, "We all make mistakes, but I never meant for anyone to die." Prison chaplains described her as quiet, polite, even motherly toward younger inmates. Yet when asked about her crimes, she'd tighten her jaw and say, "They were accidents." The years between conviction and execution stretched long. Appeals failed, public opinion hardened. She was dubbed the Black Widow. Still, she wrote to Kimberly, "Believe in me, the world lied." Her daughter visited occasionally, struggling between love and disgust. One guard later recalled seeing Kimberly leave the prison one last time, whispering, "I can't do this anymore." By 1998, 15 years after the car bomb that exposed her, the date was set, March 30th. That morning, Florida's Stark prison was unusually silent. Guards moved slowly, deliberately. Outside, protesters gathered, some demanding justice, others mercy. At dawn, Judy was led from her cell. She wore a white dress, her hair neat, her face composed. Witnesses noted that she walked without hesitation. When asked for final words, she simply said, "No, sir."
At 7:13 a.m., electricity surged through her body. At 7:16, Judy Buenoano was pronounced dead, the first woman executed in Florida since 1848. But the story didn't end there. In the days that followed, reporters revisited the town she'd lived in, the houses, the schools, the quiet streets where people still remembered her laugh. They found neighbors who still couldn't reconcile the woman who baked cookies for their children with the one who poisoned her own. One former friend said softly, "I think Judy wanted to control fate itself." But fate caught up. Her daughter changed her name and moved away. She rarely speaks publicly. Investigators went on to train new detectives using Judy's case as an example of calculated domestic homicide. In the end, Judy's story isn't just about murder. It's about the facade, the mask that many wear to hide resentment, fear, and hunger for control. She had lived through abandonment, poverty, and shame. She learned to survive by pretending, and eventually, the pretending became her truth. She once told a prison counselor, "People think I'm evil. I just wanted to be safe." But safety bought with deceit always collapses. Behind every smile in this story, there was a scream that went unheard, the sound of trust breaking, the echo of children left behind, the cost of pretending to be someone better. When investigators closed the final file, they found one line underlined in her handwriting on a scrap of paper. "Sometimes you kill the past before it kills you." No one knows when she wrote it, but it remains. A final whisper from a woman who believed survival justified everything. Her story is a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing. In bodies exhumed, in testimonies, in the trembling voices of those who refuse to forget. Justice, in the end, doesn't always heal, but it does bring closure. And for the families of James Goodyear, Bobby Joe Morris, and young Michael, that closure came not in vengeance, but in knowing the lies had finally ended. Judy Buenoano, executed March 30th, 1998, by the state of Florida. Convicted of multiple murders and attempted murder. Remember the victims. In every crime like this, there's a trail of broken trust, of children who grow up asking why, of families who never truly recover. But perhaps the real story here is not just about death, it's about what we become when we stop believing love can fix us. Thank you for watching.